Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I am your host, Hannah Chapman, and I am here today with a guest from a really special group of entrepreneurs, actually, that I'm a part of and have been having so many amazing conversations lately because we're really very on the path of spiritual evolution in business. I think that's kind of the core of, especially our dream team group that we're a part of together. That really bringing your full self to entrepreneurship and how do we build businesses in that way. So today I'm talking to Dr. Matt Kreinheder, who has been bringing integral theory, which we're going to define that as well, bringing integral theory into entrepreneurship for the past decade through his speaking, his writing, transformational retreats, coaching, and healing work. And he's also helped entrepreneurs create businesses that can be amplifiers of evolution and the triple win. And Dr. Matt, thank you for being here today. And I would love for you to tell me more about one, your background, why you're here, why you do what you do, and then what is that triple win? What are we talking about here?
Awesome. Thank you. This is going to be fun. I appreciate it. So background, I'll give kind of the thumbnail sketch of a few different phases that were really important. So as long as I can remember, I've been interested in kind of spirituality and esoterics and meditation and all things in the spiritual awakening process. I started studying meditation and astral projection when I was in high school and have been meditating ever since then, 24 years or so. So that was a real part of the journey for me. And then as I went to college, got a couple undergraduate degrees, one in music, one in business, got out, ran music stores for a while, and it was, at a young age, fun to run businesses that were doing 15 million a year, give or take. And then decided I needed to grow up and decided what I was going to do for the rest of my life because running music stores was fun, but it wasn't sustainable. So I went back to school and got a master's in acupuncture and a doctorate in chiropractic. And the impetus to study chiropractic was really focused on not so much helping people heal or feel, get out of pain in any way, shape, or form. While I think that's important, I was very clear going in that I was looking for a practical application to explore metaphysics. And what I realized is that when people are in pain and their life is falling apart, it's a good indicator that they're probably at odds with the universe, if you will, in some
Mm.
way, shape, or form. They're either going through a process of transformation or they're not on the right track. So it gave me an opportunity, and I always called my healing office my laboratory to really see where people were, what was going on, what they were thinking, what they were feeling, how the energy was moving or not moving in their body, and give them a better opportunity by helping their nervous system get open and regulated to access some of those challenges as fuel for transformation. And I ended up working with like 70% entrepreneurs in my practice, and it got to this point where the most valuable thing that I did was not necessarily putting my hands on them, it was asking them questions.
Mm.
And because I had so much history in the spiritual awakening and studying a whole bunch of different parts of, the transformational process, and then just lots of opportunity to see people in weird different spots of life that needed healing, I started to essentially do coaching, and I didn't really know so much that's what was happening at the time. I just started to sit down in the office and talk to people, and I easily spent 100 or 200 hours just talking to people and giving them advice and seeing what would happen, and they started getting outstanding results. So I leveraged that into running retreats that were really deeply and immersive, and then coaching full time. And now I've had the cool opportunity to coach, a handful of Forbes 30 under 30s, and people who have been on Shark Tank, and people who have been on the Billboard Top 40, and all the cool accolades. And So that's primarily kind of my avenue into all this. Probably the most pertinent parts for the conversation we need to have, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of side notes because I think this is fascinating. My degree is also in music, my bachelor's degree.
Mm,
I was a flute performance major
mm,
in college graduated in 2006. And then immediately went into finance in
mm.
2007, right? Even after I graduated. Um, but there was a shift in that, but at the same time, I carried music with me, and
Yeah.
I always have, truly. So first question, yeah, I'm actually curious, like, what is your music degree in specifically?
It's not specific. So I went to a really small New England college, and music was my passion, but I knew I was never going to be good enough to make it do something for me in the outside world. So I also had an interest in studying business, but I got about maybe into the middle of my sophomore year, and I just realized like if I just do business, I'm going to tear my hair out. Like I need
Mm,
something that actually connects me to feeling the way that I want to feel. And music was so compelling that I just picked it up as a second major. So I was doing some guitar performance at a not high level, but just enough to learn and play and do all the things that I want to do, play in bands and do a little bit of that kind of stuff. And then I got super interested in composition and music history. So
mm,
I focused most of my attention on composition. And it gave me a really cool outlet for how to find ways to craft my inner landscape and present that out into the world as an experience for other people to enjoy.
that's really beautiful. And the other kind of parallel, um, that I was seeing literally between you and me as well, that in financial planning, that's a very left-brained, logical,
Yeah.
data-driven area, and kind of naturally when I was able to really connect with the people that I love connecting with, which are, mostly entrepreneurs and business
Yeah.
owners, or people who have some sort of passion that they're like, okay, I'm not yet, but this is what I really want to bring into the world, right? That same kind of passion. Naturally, as we were doing like the logical stuff, the coaching just kind of came in with that.
Yeah.
And it was a natural piece for me to add in, and I didn't really understand that that's what I was even doing for a long time until someone else reflected it back to me.
Hmm.
Like, "Oh, do you see that you're doing this?" I was like, "Oh, no, but you're correct when you explain it that way. That's exactly what I'm doing."
Yeah.
Because it's what leads to this was the real connection point. It's what leads to actual transformation.
Hmm.
Right, that allows someone to have a transformative experience to then experience their money differently, experience prosperity differently, experience their work differently, um, and more in line with who they are, who they believe to be at their core
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. For sure. That's amazing.
Yeah. So when we talked before we started, one of the things I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit is your PhD that
Mhm.
you're working on right now, and really the way that that's also connected, right?
Yeah.
The kind of the spirituality and science and how these things come together. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll keep talking about it.
Yeah, totally. So the PhD is in what's called integral noetic sciences. So essentially, how do we look at spirituality and awakening from a systematic perspective, utilizing integral theory primarily, but other systems as well. And the two areas that I'm really focusing on, most of my work so far has been looking at how do we create businesses that don't extract from the planet and from people
Mm.
and create businesses and marketplaces and entrepreneurs who are really designed and focusing on generating businesses that are what I call BGEs, which is benevolence generating engines.
Oh,
So, this idea that a business really can be making positive ripples and transformation in not just the entrepreneur's life, but everyone that it touches if we base it on the three philosophical fundamentals that have been elucidated by Plato and Socrates and everyone all the way through. But those fundamentals are goodness, truth, and beauty. Those are the three primary categories that if we build a business based on that and we generate our decisions from a win-win-win perspective, there's a lot of really powerful kind of foundation and framework that can happen for what business can be. And the challenge is that, the marketplace is really hungry for that. The consumers are really hungry for that, but the market dynamics don't favor that. So there's a funny gap to learn how to cross. And that's a lot of what I help people navigate through. It's like, I really want my business to be doing powerful and good things in the world. And I've got to make sure it doesn't get itself kind of killed on the cutting floor of the market, which is a real consideration. So that's the work that I've been focusing on. And then the other side of this is my wife and I run a organization called the Temple of Wholeness, which is a 501(c)(3) church organization, really dedicated to helping those who are spiritual but not religious find ways to access something really deep and meaningful inside of them and giving them powerful spiritual experiences. So my second side of the PhD is focused on generating a theology outside of the theology of the major religions of the world. So
Mhm.
going back to those first principles and utilizing a metaphysics and a theology to build something that's for the next 2,000 years or 10,000 years. Because the religions that we've been using have so many beautiful things, but they're all built on a charismatic leader. And
Mhm.
because they're built on a person, that has certain challenges that it brings into some of the core understandings. And there needs to be a shift in the way that we're doing that in the world. So that's what I've taken up as my task to do.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's the part I want to open up about what you were just saying is this sense of entrepreneurs who want to like feel it. It's not even a want, I would say, because you're describing me is
Yeah,
what you're doing, right? Like it's an internal pull
yeah,
too. So I'll give the example for me. The internal pull for me is to help create a world where we shift the vibration of money from power and fear and control
yeah,
and shift that into prosperity and joy and love and connection.
yeah,
It's a full shift.
yeah,
And so how do I do that? I do that through, the mechanics of
yeah,
financial planning and bringing in the emotions and spirituality and healing
hmm,
along with the, like, logical piece of here's how you do it,
yeah,
right, on a money side. And so, again, yeah, that's my heart pull, my
yeah,
soul pull towards, like, this and helping other business owners and people come into alignment with that prosperity mindset.
yeah,
And so what I hear you saying, and what I'm really interested in hearing you talk more about, at the moment is this, like, separation in the marketplace between
mm,
the hunger for absolutely, the consumers are hungry for people who are in integrity, right? So that's the
yeah,
truth piece, like, fully in integrity, bringing goodness to the world.
yeah,
We want to see the like you said, the good ripple effects that are coming from what
mm,
this thing is bringing. We're kind of as consumers, a lot of us are over, like, done with the
yeah,
things that are causing harm
right,
on a wide scale, and then beauty, right?
hmm,
Those 3 things I can feel that, and I work with and have people come to me who want those same things, right? Who
yeah,
are drawn to that. But then, like you said, on the marketplace side, it's not how most business is currently done.
right.
So, what do you see as some of the, like, the main the main ways or the main like, if you're talking to an entrepreneur who's like, "I want to be over here on this side of goodness and wholeness and trust and beauty,
Yeah.
but I have to make money." And so, like, how do we get there? How does that feel for you? What do you Yeah, what's the starting point for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky conversation, but I'll offer a few things because it's also so specific and specialized for each person in their story. But one of the a couple of the main things that I found to be really important. So one of my favorite philosophers is a guy named Forrest Landry, modern philosopher alive today, brilliant, brilliant. And he has said that there's really only three categories of primary relationships that we have. We have relationships of power, relationships of transaction, and relationships of care. And the market is dominated by transaction first. And when the transaction isn't easy, people will resort to power.
Mm,
And care is off the table for the most part. If the power in the transaction has occurred and they want to be friendly after that, maybe they will, but that's not really what anything is oriented to. And so generating relationships of care first and predicating every transaction on care first and making sure there is a real authentic rapport and connection that you have clearly helped people see that whether a transaction happens or not, that you care about them and that the nature of your interaction is meant to be generative psychologically and emotionally first. That's really the foundation that we're looking for. And that's meant to be happening in community. And community, for the lack of a better, kind of explanation, is torn apart in this moment in history. We are less honestly and truly communal and more kind of cognitively tribal than we've ever been in modern history for sure. So getting back to some of those roots where we can really generate authentic care for people and let business be built on that, that's the most important thing. And then the other part that can be sometimes challenging is that there are developmental processes that are happening here. So this is part of what we look at a lot in integral theory. So in adults, consciousness develops through 7 to 9 different stages of development. And the most common ones that people talk about are mythic, magic, traditional, modern, postmodern, and integral. So depending on the system you use, there could be different names. Some use colors like spiral dynamics, and integral does too. But essentially, the idea is that most of the modern markets have been a result of modernism, which came about in the European Enlightenment in the 1700s, where many amazing things happened, including outlawing slavery in every country around the world. But it was also where the Industrial Revolution started to happen and modernizing like markets as they exist, plus the formation of corporations. All of that stuff came out of the European Enlightenment. The other
mm,
part of what was happening in the European Enlightenment was really creating more rational cognitive structures and Descartes extracting the mind from the body, right?
mhm.
So I think therefore I am is kind of the foundational philosophical structure of that modern perspective. And so modern markets and industry became really rational, cognitive, reductive, scientific, systematic, and they don't value what we call interiors, which is the sensitive internal aspects of self, the emotionality, those parts of self that are really oriented towards care and connection. So that's really kind of the fundamental difference in the market is, we people who are in that modern perspective in integral, what we call orange, the orange level of development, are logical, linear, rational, reductive, not valuing interiors, not valuing spirituality, and they use all of that focused energy to generate financial resources. So they've really kind of got the market captured on that. And then as you evolve beyond that, you do value more of these interiors and emotionality. But you've got to learn how to compete in a market where people don't value that. So there's all kinds of really interesting dynamics that you get to learn and have to be a part of that process.
This is hitting so much again, and I'm going to use X squared as an example again because it's like exactly what you're talking about as far as this is how the financial system works. This is how, like how stocks work, how, corporations are built, how the economy tends to run,
Yeah.
right? Like that's all very, very present there. And what I have found, so especially since really being very open about my interior, right?
Yeah.
My spirituality, my care and
Yeah.
concern for the human inside of the transaction. And specifically, calling out human design as like this is one of the ways that I integrate who you are, who you're being with, the tactical financial what you're doing. And since I put that out there in a very clear way, I every almost every single client, it's like 99% of the people who have come to my door, it has been people coming to me
Hmm.
saying, "That is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want. I didn't think you existed, and
Hmm.
here you are.
Hmm.
I've been waiting
Yeah.
for someone in this financial space who has this heart that I'm looking for."
Yeah.
And so I use that example as this way to say, and I charge prices that feel good for me for the
Hmm.
way that I do work and for the depth that I go through
Yeah.
with people. And then, there's some traditional stuff. And then there's the planning and the human design aspects, right, that we bring all together. And so I say that to mention that I also have been with a lot of people in the more spiritual space
Hmm.
or people who are passionate about what they do and do it with such love that they then
Yeah.
don't charge for it.
Right.
Right? There's that aspect of like um what you're saying here that if it's more internal, if it's internal focused and it's helping you get internal results,
Yeah.
that doesn't I can't see the ROI with my eyes, so it's not as valuable.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the outside world. That's what we're talking about here, like not valuing the inside world.
Hmm.
And so people who are more in that space can have a hard time valuing their services,
Totally.
like, in a way that makes it financially viable for them to continue
Yeah.
to do that work.
Yeah.
And so from like my experience of bringing myself online in that way, I see and hear and experience how hungry people are
Hmm.
for this work. And so I'm curious from your side, like what are some of the like industries that of people who come to you who are like, "Yes,
Hmm.
this is what I need. This is what I'm wanting to do." Yeah, like what kind of industries do you see? What kind of impacts are you seeing kind of in other ways? Because I'm sure it's not all financial advisors, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, who are you working with?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the easy one, the coaches and healers find me and they're super easy to work with. They're just looking for someone who's ahead of them on the path. And because I've been doing this for so long and my perspectives are wide and deep, they'd recognize, I would say that in human design, I was mentioning to you earlier, I'm a mental projector, and the gift of the mental projector is like I see you like no one else is going to see you. And
Mhm,
it part of the reason we have to wait for invitation is because I am going to see you. So if that's not invited, it can be really uncomfortable.
mhm,
So if there's something to find and figure out, I'm going to find it. And so, coaches, healers, people in that category, I do a lot there. And then because I've developed such a specific and interesting skill set in the healing side, people who are going through weird stuff in life, stuff that they can't figure out on their own. I often get called in on that stuff too. And, just in the last couple weeks, I've worked with people who have exited big businesses for 8 figures and people who are bank chairmen and people who are, other people in the banking industry. So there's a lot of different spaces that I get called into, but I didn't make the joke. It's a joke now, but it was actually how people talked about me when I ran my office. It's like when people need a wizard that, they call Matt. And literally, when I used to run my healing practice, people would say, they wouldn't say, I'm going to see the chiropractor. They're saying, I'm going to see the wizard. So it's this funny thing, when you can really deeply see people and you've got answers they have no idea how to find, you get called funny things like that. So yeah, the work now, there's a couple different categories of people for the one-on-one stuff. And then when I'm speaking or things like that, that's going out to a wider audience and it's really focused on what do we do? Like what's the nature of how we actually make transformations in the market and how we make transformations in businesses. So those are the conversations that I'm usually engaging in.
And so when we're looking at so an interesting note when you said bankers, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like I feel like we're at a big precipice in the change in our financial systems.
Yep.
Like for sure. I feel that partly because I have a pulse on it myself
Yeah.
as well, right? But there's yeah, I just feel like there's winds of change, right?
Yeah.
Like the dynamic is changing and we're seeing things differently. And I shared with you that I'm a 6-2 manifesting generator, and
Hmm.
part of my design is also, in my gene key sequence, in my pearl sequence, my pearl is on a line 6,
Mm.
which is systems and nature. And
Hmm.
so, like, that relationship to prosperity, I am naturally one that I see a bigger picture of,
Yep.
like, where are things broken and how can they be fixed? How can they work for more people? How can our financial system be more abundant overall for more of the population, the way that nature is naturally abundant, the
Yeah.
way that a single acorn can create an entire oak forest,
Hmm.
right? That's the nature of abundance truly. And so that it's not surprising. I find it like joyfully funny, I think. Like,
Yeah.
that makes me happy to know that people in those positions are also seeking you out.
Yeah.
Like, something feels super wrong.
Hmm.
How do we like, it feels wrong inside of me. I've been part of this system that's like, something isn't right. Like,
Yeah.
how do we shift? Um, and so I think that's a beautiful spot to say, how do you shift? Like, what's that process? What does that look like? And what is integral theory? Because when I
Yeah.
read that from you, I was like, I don't know what that is. And then
Hmm.
I went to your website and saw some of that. I'm like, oh, okay. I see. I'm like understanding more of that. It's pretty
Yeah.
clear once you see it. So tell
Yeah.
us more, like, what is integral theory? And what are some of those steps that you see when people are moving through that spiritual awakening and transformation?
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I'll answer the integral theory question. And if we want to loop back to the markets question, we can do that. So, integral theory is a meta theory that helps people understand how to understand, essentially. So, it has a few primary aspects of the theory. It has a developmental staging, which is part of what I was mentioning earlier, those 7 to 9 steps that are really descriptive of how we evolve our awareness as individuals. And this is integral theory was developed by Ken Wilber, but he based that on, you know, the work of lots and lots of other sociologists, psychologists, and other people who had already started to kind of create this understanding of what consciousness development looks like. So that's one part. Then there's understanding of how the world works in some of these primary buckets. He calls the 4 quadrants. So that's the subjective, the objective, the intersubjective, and the interobjective. So essentially all of reality, no matter what we're looking at, whether it's our bodies, our emotions, quantum physics, or grand understandings of how biology and mycelial networks work, you can find everything in the universe in these 4 quadrants, which is a pretty cool way to kind of categorize anything that's going on. So that's another useful model. And then there's stages of spiritual awakening. lines of personal development and a couple other things that we won't get too deep into because the states of the adult consciousness development tend to be the most interesting thing for people, and then also the stages of spiritual awakening. So that's mostly what Integral is looking at. And what's so cool is that because it's a meta theoretic model, I can take another philosophy like say third wave feminism, and I can say, outstanding. Look at the beautiful things that third wave feminism has created. And here are also some of the challenges. It's expressing a what we would call a green, postmodern, deconstructionist perspective. And it's operating primarily in the upper left subjective domain, all those interior spaces. So, without getting too nerdy and deep, it's a way to look at systems of understanding so I know where they fit in their own developmental process. And I don't get stuck and locked in one worldview that can be useful, but also can be really kind of challenging and boxing people in.
Mm. I love the yeah, I love the example you brought in there. Um, even with, yeah, third wave feminism being such a uh, there's um well, I'll say this. I am absolutely of the um deep knowing that we are all here to be treated equally,
Yeah.
right? That gender is no basis for discrimination in any way, shape, or form. And um, I have also like experienced in my life where the women who came before me in my industry who had to really fight for their place,
Yes.
right? In the 80s and 90s, especially,
Yep.
like the women who were in finance at that time were freaking badasses. Like,
Yep.
and they had to be
Yep.
in order to survive in that space. And I feel like where I am, so I'm, 18 years into my career at this point. So I've seen more of an evolution as well. We are the women my age now, so I'm almost 40 and there's women in their 60s and 70s who are, who were again like those front runners. We see how that attitude of having to be the battle axe
Hmm.
was necessary, but also caused a lot of harm
Yeah.
in its wake.
Yeah.
And so now I can see that and be so incredibly thankful for the work that they did,
Yeah.
and also say, I am going to build something from that and make it better
Yeah.
and reduce the harm
Yeah.
that was caused while like being so appreciative for the progress. It's like, okay, you passed me the football. I got it.
Yeah.
We're moving forward. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you as well in that the quadrants pieces. It's like, let's look at where things are on this map.
Hmm.
Like where's the good?
Yeah.
And what can we build from, and what's the piece that we want to transmute and transform
Yeah.
to also make that, turn that into more good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You're right. There was certainly a boys club, there was a patriarchy, there was those things were very real, and to some extent still are. And the amount of energy that had to get invested to break through and illuminate that those things were going on was not small. So they're hard fought battles and important to recognize. And on the inverse side, it created a whole scholarship and a whole set of perspectives of people looking at any hierarchy and any power as bad, wrong, or patriarchal, or colonialist, or white, or whatever. So there's a whole tricky conversation we could get into on that side of things if we wanted to. But all that to say, these perspectives evolve, and it doesn't mean that it negates any of the previous perspectives. One of the key frames that we hold in integral theory is perspectives transcend and include. So when we get a larger perspective, It needs to be built on the back of a perspective that we've already had, not cutting it away and throwing it away, because we grew up through that previous perspective and it's inside of us. And there's parts of us that are still operating in that way. And if we want to be whole and healthy and inclusive in our own psychology and emotionality, we need to include all those aspects in self. So, one of the things that when I'm working with people in the financial industry and asking them, they're telling me what's going on in their heart, I want to balance that they're working in an industry where they still need to be a badass. It's like, yes, feel all these feelings in this safe container so you can go out and bring this heart into the world in a world that doesn't always want it. And so this is how we start to stack some of these layers of development and make sure that they're functional in the world.
Mm. Oh, yeah, you're just saying so many things that are like hitting like just so close to my heart. I love it. I love it. And I would like, okay, I wish we had like another hour we could dive into like several other things, and I really want to. So maybe we'll have to do a part two,
Great.
and talk a little bit more because we didn't even get to really dive into this like the scientific versus I'm doing
Yeah.
quote unquote versus the spiritual, right? Like
Hmm.
how do those come together, and that being part of your work as well, which I'm super interested to discuss further, and also the sense of the modern mystic
Hmm.
and what does that look like, and bringing being more in tune with who you're being over what you're doing, right? There's so much there. So
Yeah.
I like I said, I wish we had more time. But we'll do another part 2 if that sounds good to you as well. But for now, I would love for you to share how people can find you. You talked a little bit about the one-on-one work that you do, but I know you have more offerings than that as well. So where can people get in touch with you, learn more if this was, exactly someone's speed and they're like, that's who I need to talk to. How do they get to you?
Yeah, thank you. Super simple, drmatk.com. That has a little bit of introduction and a form that people can fill out so they can find a time to chat. I just closed down a bunch of my offerings and moved all the content onto YouTube. So there's hours and hours of stuff, including my talks from that Denver conference and a conference I spoke at in Budapest. So there's all kinds of good stuff that if people are interested in this conversation, they can dig into some of that there. And specifically around the people who are in an awakening and an entrepreneurial process, because there's so much support needed for those people to get where they got to go. So that's probably the best place to find some good stuff.
All right. I love it. And thank you so much for being here with me today. You have such a the way that I'm feeling it is like a very focused, powerful energy to you that's
Hmm.
also very like gentle and quiet,
Mm.
and the way that you know yourself as a projector that waits for the invitation, that's what that feels like. It's like I know what I know, and I'm also here waiting for you to invite that in.
Exactly
And
right.
yeah, it's palpable. I feel that. So I
Mm.
appreciate that. I've loved this conversation. For anyone who's listening, all of the information that you need will be in the show notes. Super easy to find. And if anything resonated from this episode, I cannot tell you how much I love hearing from people about what was the thing, what was your golden nugget from this episode, and reach out to Dr. Matt as well and let him know what's going on in your world, what's resonating for you from this conversation. So thank you again for being here, and we'll talk soon, I hope.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Hannah. This has been great.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough. You are enough. And your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.